So I've been really busy lately. I have a kid and he's about a month old now, and with work, it takes time, But I wanted to get into something I feel strongly about, and that's how people debate and how we scale as a versus or power scaling community. So there can be plenty of reasons why someone may find interest in versus battles or power scaling, such as it's cool, or I want to represent my favorite character, find the strongest attacks, or how strong those attacks are, etc. But one thing I would hope we all want in our discussions and our takes or beliefs is accuracy and consistency. Somewhat recently, I was asked to debate my scaling for Naruto and Bleach, and I told them that in talking to me about this, it would turn into a debate about concepts. And this is because conceptually, I seem to differ from the normal scaler. Let's cover these concepts, starting with attack potency and destructive capacity are different. Very different. Secondly, statements with no proof or evidence don't belong in versus debates or scaling. Even further than that, author's intent is a worse way to be accurate and consistent than the concept death of the author. And lastly, axiomatically, being accurate and consistent with your takes is important to the degree that if you concede you don't care about being accurate or consistent in what you say, then what you say is 100% irrelevant and you've made it impossible to trust anything you could say. So that said, step 1, attack potency is very different from destructive capacity. I've covered this before, but I found that someone was trying to give a slightly better answer, but it's actually still absolutely insane to believe that's true. When they said that attack potency and destructive capacity were different, I asked, as usual, if a sword swing from a normal human would be stronger than a bullet, since against a human, for example, the sword would do more damage. It would destroy more matter in this instance, and people tend to look only at what damage attacks cause, or how much is destroyed, which I would consider destructive capacity, its capacity to destroy. This highlights why thinking this way is wrong. Of course, a bullet is stronger. It's also more potent with its force. However, the person I was attempting to debate, because my child, maybe you can hear him a bit, ended it before it began, and I had to leave. I had to take care of him, so we didn't get into, we were just trying to figure things out, but we got just far enough that I was already wanting to make a video kind of dedicated to this stuff, so, well, here it is. Anyways, they brought up the idea of versus Wiki's definition of attack potency, so let's look at it. To this site, it's an alternate term, but with a more direct meaning. They say that an attack that doesn't destroy as much can still be as, if not more, potent than another attack that destroys more, correct? They also say they measure this in its energy damage equivalent, and you'll see the energy in joules or in tons. And lastly, they go on to say the attack potency depends on the energy output of a single attack. So this is not factoring in like the totality energy output of all of Naruto's clones put together or something. It's of a single attack. And also not the AoE of the attack. Not the AoE of the attack. But okay, so in this definition, it would seem the sword versus bullet analogy doesn't work. The bullet has far more energy behind it, and so it's the stronger attack. Is this definition good? Is it accurate? Hell no. Now, the person I was talking to seemed to not be aware of it saying that it's not supposed to factor in the AoE of the attack, and they argued you scale on the energy equivalent, period. Let me ask this to everyone, not just him. If the AoE of an attack doesn't matter, it doesn't factor into how strong an attack is. I'm not saying not how strong it could be, but how strong it is. Would you then say a person who is standing in the ocean waters at a beach is tanking the entire tidal force of the entire ocean? Would you say that? Because that seems pretty absurd, right? So I'll reiterate. So is the argument strength of attack equals total force of attack regardless of AoE? If so, plug that in with a person in the ocean waters. Am I really supposed to calculate the total force of the ocean to determine how strong it is regardless of the AoE? Because this necessitates that a person standing in the water at the beach is tanking the entire force of the ocean. That's a you opinion. This is why I ask what is more potent between, say, a vase of lava and a forest fire, or an energy blast the size of a mountain versus a punch, like of a normal human hand, where both destroy a mountain. Okay, would it not be the case and more accurate to say that instead we should be looking at the total amount of force divided by the surface area of the matter it's enacting its force upon? So in this case, why doesn't the total force of an ocean just absolutely destroy a human? Even just tidal waves, which are a fraction of the total force of the entirety of an ocean? It's because when it's divided across, the size of a normal human, well, you're talking about such fractions upon fractions. It's just the minor amount of little waves that are even touching you, right? This should seem pretty obvious. Well, so if we use like this definition, where it's talking about like divided across the surface area of the matter that the force is being enacted upon, then literally every feat makes sense. All of them. A bullet has more force than a sword, yes, it has more total force, but it also has more force per square inch or per square foot, etc. The per square anything, using the word per is to mean divided by. So is a smaller amount of lava that can't possibly destroy as much as a wildfire, or even have as much total energy as the wildfire. Is it more potent? Of course it is. In measuring the lava's heat, it is hotter or has more heat per square foot. For example, if we were to take a character with an unknown heat resistance, we don't know to what degree, they just resist heat to some degree. If you had to put them in a wildfire or drench them with lava, really, people, you're gonna say that he would have a harder time with the forest fire? And not just physical or heat, but even poison, right? Like, it should be easy by now. Which poison is the most potent poison? They aren't asking which poison has the most poison. So yes, at the end of the day, this radically changes how feats are actualized in debates, and especially scaling, and that's okay. If we care about being accurate and consistent more than I want this character to be better than others or something, then you need to start realizing that destroying something with less AoE is multiplicatively more potent. That if two people destroy an equal mountain but one person does it with 1/1000th of the AoE as the first, that second attack is 1,000 times more potent. As a feat, this doesn't factor in scaling, that is separate. But as a literal shown feat, it's showing 1,000 times more potency. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to how statements with no proof or evidence don't belong in a versus debate or in scaling. So, again I ask, do you care about being accurate and consistent with your takes? Taking a statement as true means several things, but the main question that needs to be asked is, what convinced you the statement is true? Usually when I ask this, it comes down to, it's how the author lets us know their power, or mainly just author's intent, which I'll get to next. But is this the best way to be accurate or consistent? Let's look at some examples of statements. Do you believe that Kakashi is omnipotent? Can the Raiton Chakra mode withstand any jutsu? Is the Light Fang not only light speed, but undodgeable? Even though Naruto verbatim dodged it. You guys can figure that one out. Is Yusuke infinitely stronger than anything the SDF ever felt? Is Yujiro faster than the concept of speed, Baki fans? Is Mother Flippin' Ippo from Hajime no Ippo based on real life boxing, punching at the speed of light? And there's other even more direct light speed statements in Hajime no Ippo. How about in Kingen Ashura, they light speed? You get the picture, right? So is all of this just author's intent? What if I told you hyperbole and hype existed? What if that was their intent? How objective do you care to be? And look, and these people challenge that you don't need feats or scaling that corroborate these statements, that the statements are all the evidence you need. Well, this take requires you to believe every statement ever. Hyperbole can't possibly exist to you in scaling a verse? Because if you accept hyperbole exists, how could you possibly identify what is or isn't hyperbole? For example, how do I do so on my end? Well, I use feats, right? I look for evidence. If feats and evidence aren't used at all, and there aren't any for the statements I'm using here as my examples, the take statements are all the evidence you need, or it's the author's intent, means you actually think these statements are true. You actually think, for example here, that a bully saying he's 1,000,000 times stronger than this kid means he's actually 1,000,000 times more powerful, can use 1,000,000 times more force than this kid. Because let's be honest, you aren't using feats or scaling. Now, the second thing that's brought up is that the statements aren't contradicted. As long as it's not contradicted, it's valid. This is also very faulty if we care about being accurate and consistent. So, we're looking at if statements not contradicted, then true, or therefore true. Is that really accurate to you? Do you realize logistically, you can't prove a negative in almost any instance without the exact verbatim proof? For example, if I say there exists invisible space clowns that can create black holes, would you believe me? And furthermore, how could you possibly prove me wrong? Actually think about it. Prove me wrong. It's literally impossible to do so. Can't do it. It's like proving that God doesn't exist. That's why there's the atheist view isn't that God doesn't exist. There are a few that go that way, but that's stupid. Instead, what you do is you take the view that I'm not convinced that God exists. It's those who believe in God where you challenge that and say, well, you are saying that God does exist. That's a positive claim. What has convinced you that God exists? And it's like, well, you didn't prove that God doesn't exist. You can't prove that God doesn't exist. That's impossible. You can't prove that there is not invisible space monkeys or clowns creating black holes. And you can't do it. And so off of how you guys are treating statements, that's not a way to be accurate. I mean, hell, you even like God of the gaps, sort of like fallacies, like, holy crap, I just gave you an example, invisible space clowns that create black holes. I just solved for how black holes exist or how they come into existence. I'm awesome, right? No, look, just because something isn't contradicted doesn't necessitate it as true or that it could even be true at all. If not contradicted, therefore true is a garbage concept and allows for extremely inaccurate takes based on absolutely disgusting assumptions. It allows for that. They don't always have to be that way. I understand that there can be various methods. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to waste too much time trying to think of the word, but yes, you can take, for example, the statement, I own a dog. You don't actually know if I own a dog or not, but dogs exist. We've seen dogs. We can actually study dogs. So it's not that far of a leap to say, yeah, it's not going to challenge my worldview that dogs exist. But again, if I'm saying space clowns, exist that create black holes, what's the difference there? If your only, value on truth statements is simply, statements are enough. Okay. Whew. This stuff gets to me. Well, just mostly because it seems like people are very hypocritical. That's the problem. Okay. So moving on from there. For anyone who cares about accuracy, how could you possibly claim that a statement with a foundation in feats and scaling is less accurate or equally accurate as those without? Or hypocritically, you'd say that you want to be as accurate as possible, right? While simultaneously taking unbacked statements at face value, something that objectively leads to very inaccurate takes. You could have the opinion, let's say we're playing chess. The reason why I'm asking, do you agree that being accurate and consistent as possible matters, is kind of like chess. The rules for chess are made up. And you can have the opinion that any given number of moves are better than another. But if we agree, if we can come down to an agreement that winning chess is the goal, as I'm presenting here that being accurate and consistent would be the goal, with our takes. In chess, I could therefore then extrapolate like objective claims about the state of chess, that making a move that takes another piece with no risk is objectively better than setting yourself up to lose a piece to no risk of them. And there's no opinion about that, right? That is how we could take actually objective stances on these sorts of things. This is why I'm talking about taking these statements at face value like this objectively leads to very inaccurate takes. But the author's intent, you say. The author knows a series better than you. I get it. Is the manga an interview now? Hell, even in spoken language, hyperbole exists. Do I need to reiterate how hyperbole works? But there's more. As scalers, we have a few terms. Tell me if you agree with them, or know of them. Do you believe in outliers? How about plot and character-induced stupidity? If you said yes to any of them, then you agreed the author's intent is not as important or as good as the concept of death of the author. Real quick, did you know that authors don't really care about the verses or scaling community, and they want to tell stories? To move the plot forward seems to be the intention, the authorial intent 99% of the time, if not 100%. You mean to tell me that in a versus battle, that if in a story Aquaman loses all his strength and can barely hold himself up, but the plot demands he beats Reverse Flash, that you actually, as a versus debater, as a scaler, have near-dead Aquaman above Reverse Flash? And even if Reverse Flash in the same series has all the better feats, you'd still have to say near-dead Aquaman is superior because, well, that's what the author intended. Sorry, but author's intent doesn't belong in the versus or scaling community. These hypotheticals are without plot. They are fun reasoning hypotheticals built on logic, not plot. Reverse Flash wins because his feats in scaling put him so far above a near-dead Aquaman that he simply can't lose. Unless somehow you are a versus debater who actually believes outliers, piss, plot-induced stupidity, and cis, character-induced stupidity, concepts don't apply, somehow. And with that, most of the concepts in versus debates and scaling have been covered, again. But I will say, for one more time, do you care about being as accurate and consistent as possible? I will keep pushing this point. Please care. Don't hold on to fanboyism. In my videos, I separate AP from DC. That makes verses with mostly AoE feats to tend to have lower numbers than people like. That's okay. This is accurate scaling and is applied evenly among all series. It's not to lower your favorite series or anything. Now, for the Discord that I somewhat made this video for, notice that I barely brought up Naruto in total of all of this. Notice I didn't bring up my scaling for him at all. It's because I don't need to for the concepts to be right. This is the why I scale Naruto to where I do. Now that said, I don't mathematically figure the perfect numbers for feats. I don't have the time. I taught myself binomial probability when I was much younger just to have an edge in Fire Emblem PvP, to be honest. I love math. If I get the time, and I mean, honestly, I'm set to retire in about 4 to 5 years. I'm not some crazy old guy, alright? I'm probably older than most people in the whole community anymore. Look, I'm just 28, guys. But then, about that 4 to 5 year period, then I should have the time to really break into calculations. I would love to. But until then, why am I so certain about my numbers? Why am I sure that I'm accurate with what I say? It's called lowballing, another concept. If you show me a jar filled with candy, I can take a guess and be close or far off. But if I lowball and say this jar that looks to have at least 200 plus pieces of candy, and say it therefore is 100% safe to say it has at least 100 pieces of candy, okay? At least 100 is entirely correct. It's the statement of it must have at least 100. I would bet my life on it. I do try to get as close as I possibly can with my scaling, while always making sure anything I claim is at a lowball, with it always that lowball always being true. I should also note that calcs can also be faulty, with missing time frames, unknown distances, and pixel scaling can really mess this all up. It can be good, but it can also be terrible. Oh, and just for fun, by the way, here's a funny feat versus statement. Storm-style laser circus is light speed, huh? It's a laser after all, right? And I guess we're just assuming that chakra-based attacks are the speed of natural elements for whatever reason. Funny how it's slower than the lightning-style flash pillar, which reaches them within the same page with a flash. And then still even more panels after it, the laser circus still hasn't reached them. I guess what, is the flash like 6 times FTL, yeah? My god, that's dumb. I could go on forever, but instead I'll be ending it here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I did sort of recap from my first 3 videos, but this argues really a prescriptive claim on how we ought to scale and debate. Lowball. Take statements that specifically have actual evidence. Use scaling. Don't make unfounded assumptions as fact. Authorial intent is bad, or at least worse than death of the author, and everyone agrees and doesn't even know it. AP is vastly different from DC. Please start factoring this all in for all the series. Evenly and fairly, no favorites. Just be accurate and consistent is all I ask. Thank you for watching. Ciao.
Pastor.